Morning all. Okay, let's have a look at my other loss from the recent Herts Congress. It wasn't the best Herts Congress ever, where I lost 2 games. I only ended up with 2 out of 5. But there's a bit of meat on the bone here to explore, a bit of insights, and I think there's the bad influence of video titles actually, because during the course of the game I think something happened with respect to some past videos I was reviewing, sort of near to the game, before the game, a few days prior to the game. In particular, there was this game Smyslov against Agnos, because I had been going through retitling videos. I remember this strategy I described going around the back in the Smyslov Agnos game. It was an English opening, and I think there was some inspiration for a plan which wasn't quite appropriate for the position in this game. So I want to show you that sometimes, you shouldn't take video titles as strategies for the current position. So I was white against Andrew, and actually I think we're about 50% on our track record against each other now. I actually ended up giving him a lift to the venue. Actually, we ended up we were paired against each other. It was quite funny. So I had breakfast with Andrew and gave him a lift to the venue, and ended up playing him. So c4, the English opening with white, knight c3, knight c6. Something to note for one of the major themes of this game is the central pawn tension. If you look at the central pawn tension, these pawns are actually blockading each other. If we just quickly go to a different opening, you see the blockades in different openings. Like black is in the Royal Pairs is basically trying to reinforce e5 all the time by all the moves. In the Queen's Gambit again, you see a blockade, pawns against pawns. So one thing about hypermodern openings which don't directly occupy the centre is that it isn't so evident this pawn restraint. These pawns are like blockading each other. But in the English opening it's a bit more subtle, but still it's there. The pawns are blockading each other, and in fact to try and get a central pawn majority is still kind of important, I think, because the central pawns in the ending especially are going to be quite dangerous sometimes. So that's something to bear in mind. So e3 here, and then he played d6, breaking the symmetry to some relief. Knight ge2, and he played the trendy looking knight h6. So I had some decision already. Do I allow this knight f5 with a lot of pressure on d4, and as if d4 will be completely discouraged in the future? But the trade-off, if I play something like e4, I'm weakening d4, but it's kind of a Botvinnik system, reminiscent maybe of the recent Kramnik-Carlsen game. The Botvinnik system might be increasing in popularity as a result of some key high-level games. But anyway, I thought here, e4 seems quite justified, so I did play it, and he locked up the position. So our central pawn situation is interesting now. It's quite a locked pawn structure. If there's a pawn here, it is actually reinforcing these two guys, and it's difficult to envisage how this structure is going to be undermined centrally. But you can imagine thematic moves like b5 and f5. If that pawn's taken away and that pawn's taken away, then can you imagine this pawn coming forward and crashing through in the centre like this? You can imagine a central pawn disaster like that. And actually that's the kind of strategy which was inflicted on me throughout the course of the game. So first, after h3 we have f5. So more central pawn tension. I did reinforce it with d3. And after castles, bishop e3, Andrew plays knight d4, and I didn't think my position was that brilliant, but maybe it's not that bad either. Queen d2, and he moves the knight away because it was being attacked. And now here I might be getting on the slippery slope by underestimating central pawn mobility here. So at the moment these pawns are kind of restraining these pawns. And so if you capture away from the centre with moves like this, you are asking for a central pawn, phalanx to happen. But I thought it was kind of justified here I mean, one of my books, Avrook, you know, sometimes you play EF and F forward, but here it seems quite dangerous to do that. I played EF, and to my surprise actually, Andrew didn't play G takes F. I'm not sure actually what's an engine view of this position after EF. Knight takes and bishop F5 is given the best. Okay, so knight takes was actually played. Okay, so now look at the central pawn mobility. There's only 2 pawns in the centre here, but I have extended the scope of the bishop, so there's some trade-offs. I've got access to d5 with that bishop. Doesn't seem too bad. But now, you know, imagine, you know, black's trying to undermine white's central game even more by playing for b5. That's exactly what Andrew does now. After rook b8, I was concerned actually that if I allow a quick b5 here, that b4, particularly knight d5, bishop e6, I could be getting in trouble with this knight kind of being dislocated on d5. So I put it there immediately to try and potentially reinforce it with the other knight. He plays b5 immediately, and now I've got the similar kind of issue here, that if I play b3, I thought that maybe, you know, he just locks the knight out by playing b4 to stop the reinforcing of the knight, and then play for bishop e6. Now here I get a bit panicky actually, and really this move would have reinforced and kept this kind of central blockade tension that these pawns are blockading the mobility of these pawns. But I play b4, which does allow, you know, a flank pawn to come and undermine my central pawn chain, so which would increase, you know, mobility immediately, like for moves like e4 potentially. But actually Andrew plays knight d4 here, and I take with the bishop, and then I play f4. So really what's happening centrally now, this pawn is actually very important now. If it's knocked out, then you could imagine these two guys, you know, potentially being really dangerous in the center. And it's at this point, I think, after king h8, I really have to seriously consider the dangers of BC knocking out this d3 pawn. Perhaps Andrew should have played BC here. He played actually king h8, but I think BC here is probably a stronger move, just to knock out white's central pawn mobility. In fact, it's given as one of the stronger moves, and black's actually better. So I've already gone wrong actually in theory, I think, because we have central pawn mobility here. Where did I go wrong exactly? In this position, maybe just to maintain d3, c takes b, so say rook takes, and now rook ab1 or knight ec3, so say the rook moves, and I think white should be okay here. It doesn't look that brilliant to have the d3 pawn, but it does hold up black's pawn structure, and white does have control of d5. So I think I've already slipped up. I'm going on a slippery slope now after this b4. This central pawn mobility theme is becoming more and more evident now. But BC wasn't immediately played. It was played now after this prompting, after a4. Now Andrew plays b takes c4, and so d takes c4. We see I'm getting strategically done over. Central pawn mobility, you know, the pawns are the soul of chess. Fiddle once said that. Look at black's central pawns. The potential now for e4 is only held up by this bishop, but even that, you know, and there's this bishop attacking h3. The bishop's already responsible for things. Actually, it's h3 which becomes a focus now. After bishop e6, I play b5, and now queen c8 hitting h3 and c8. At the moment, also, you know, black's got these double pawns, and if I ever did fe, I'm sort of undoubling black's pawns as well as giving frontal pressure on my knight on d5. But I'm sort of seduced by that pretty soon, as I say, by the influence of a recent video I had watched prior to the game, which is an instructive mistake, I think, because really, you know, your position that you've got in your game is special. There's a strategic battle, there's a tactical battle. You've got to focus on those key issues, and you know, a past video title or strategy from another game is not always that relevant. But in the course of a longer game, sometimes it's easy to become distracted. I play King H2, offering C4. I think there's at least a perpetual of Queen C4, perpetually attacking the Queen, and Andrew didn't really want to go in for that. Just to make sure of that. Say takes. I can at minimum probably just do this and attack the Queen. The Queen hasn't got any squares, I think. Let's just verify that. It's going to be a draw by repetition at the very least. So he's not really interested in that pawn at the moment. So actually he plays knight d8, and it's here the seductive combination, in inverted commas, takes grip on me. As I mentioned, if I ever did FE, I'm actually doing two things. I'm undoubling the pawns here. I'm providing frontal attack possibilities, and in a way I'm also increasing potential mobility of these pawns. You know, these pawns potentially, if they go like this, and this pawn in particular is already basically a passed pawn which needs to be blockaded, that d4 pawn. But this next move is a result of seduction of a past video, really, the Smyslov Agnos video, which maybe I'll put in a link in the description, because I considered that there's a way of infiltrating black's position, so sort of around the back strategy, which I thought, you know, Smyslov might be proud of, but really it's irrelevant. The combination idea is that I can get the Queen round the back with Queen b4, potentially Queen e7, or even a rook infiltrating. And it looked promising for a little moment, but that moment is very costly in terms of the strategic, you know, tension of the pawns in the centre. So I'm seduced to play f takes e. I think black's evaluation must surely go back, go up significantly after f takes e. So 0.38. It's undoubling black's pawns basically in principle. Rook takes f1, rook takes f1. So forcing moves, which damage one's position in this case, Queen b4, and okay, there's an infiltration idea which looks kind of, you know, interesting, and it seems to be even further justified very shortly, because I play Queen e7, which looks interesting as an infiltration goes, and after Queen d7 I find a tactical move which seems to seal it over, and I'm thinking, you know, oh, I'm definitely going to win this game now with this next move. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 10 seconds. I was quite excited to play it, and I thought this is going to be too much pressure on black's position. But strategically, these moments of tactical pressure come at a great cost strategically, because black's central pawn mobility has increased. These two pawns in the centre have no, you know, blockaders. You know, they're unblockaded pawns. There's only this bishop holding up this. This knight is not really doing anything against d3. It's actually a subject of tempo game. But anyway, there's a tactical move here which still seems to justify this temporary infiltration strategy. So 10 seconds starting from there if you can guess it. Okay, I play rook f7, and I think it should be, in theory, actually about equal here at move 26. After this move, nearly about equal, according to an engine point of view. So Andrew, he did take rook takes, and it looks as though the rook's pretty good and dangerous, and a7's dangerous, and you know, the d5 control looks good, but this next move provides a big question mark. I think it's one of the strongest moves in the position. Black's actually doing well. If he can get these central pawns going, that will be absolutely brilliant. The next move is actually hitting, you know, one of the Achilles heels of the position. He hasn't got access to that via c8, but c4, as this engine actually shows, is exploitable with this next move, bishop f5, because if it's coming to d3, it's hitting c4 and e2, so it's a very strong move, I think, this bishop f5, as well as, you know, it has to move anyway. But here I thought, okay, knight c7, as though knight e8 was very tempting, but black has enough resources here to counter-attack, because otherwise knight e8 is hitting g7 a7 potentially in a very useful manner. Okay, and if the bishop ever moved, then rook takes e5, say, if I'm actually hitting that bishop with rook and knight here. So this looks at this point to be quite dangerous for black, and in fact evaluation here at move 28, let's see from a technical point of view, it's better for black because we start to see the central pawn mobility implications of d3 even are coming. So these central pawns are now really dangerous. They haven't been kept under lock and key, but in this position knight c5 was played, and knight e8, I had some erroneous calculation as well, but these pawns are looking pretty menacing. a4 is now also attacked, and I thought, okay, knight e8 might actually not be that hot, because of something like bishop f8 here, and if rook takes e5, then I totally miscalculated this position, so bishop d6 was possible, not seeing my knights actually covering d6. But in post-mortem there's actually knight d3. I think knight d3 is the strongest move here, because this rook's now not that brilliant to protect e8, whilst this bishop's of course protecting c5. In this position I think knight d3 gives black the advantage. Actually knight d7 and d3 is given, but knight d3 is also a small advantage. But actually stronger apparently is just knight d7. That's simple and strong, forcing an exchange sack, which is not that desirable to go down the exchange. So knight d7. If knight d3, there's probably a bit more chance with the exchange sack being a little bit more effective for some reason, which I sort of considered in the game, that there's some dangerous pawns here. The knight's actually blockading d4, which is one of the themes of the game. But if knight d7, then that's strategically more sensitive for the pawn. So the exchange sack here, mind you, what's happening here? The knight's in pre. So if I played here, then I think d3, that shows the pawn crashing through. So knight c3, rook c8, the pawn's really dangerous. So that just shows as well, these central pawns have gone too far now. This temporary infiltration influenced by a video title, from a previous game I'd seen a day or two before this game, was just simply a bad influence. So strategically I'm being crushed actually, because of an irrelevant video title. One of the bad influences of going into a forcing sequence, which is strategically bankrupt, being lured into playing some forcing moves sometimes. But central pawn mobility is really a key theme of many openings, including the English opening. Okay, so pawns occupying the centre are actually restraining each other. But here, black's pawns are going absolutely nuts now. They're coming forward, they're crashing through after bishop d3. And in fact, in my frustration, I'm also losing c4 tactically. So even though I have infiltrated, the opponent's infiltrated, and actually all these pawns are like becoming vulnerable. And this is a lost position. Now I desperately sacked a piece. I could have resigned here basically. It's become a lost position. b6. Okay, I get a piece back, but he's still left with a huge central pawn, which is about to win the game, very simply, with rook d8, and he's got the bishop pair, so it's a one position now. So it just, and the bishop's actually navigating the pawn to its destination, cutting off this bishop. So d3, I desperately it's lost, and I resign here. So I thought, anyway, that was interesting for central pawn mobility, this game. An instructive game, which I've been meaning to go through in the last few days. But if we check it out in overview and summary, look at the central pawn tension again. and I hope maybe this is a consideration in your own games. But also this idea, you know, you've got a particularly unique, in your own game, you've got a particularly unique strategic and tactical struggle. It's unique to your game. So if you pick up an old video of mine and look at the video title, and there's a particular strategy which won that game, like infiltration or roundabout, it might not be that relevant. Sometimes you can be seduced by ideas from other games and try and put them in your own games, but that's sometimes wrong. I think also more broadly in they say that in IT systems you can't sometimes get an IT system or an idea from another company. It's a different context. Same from another game, it's a completely different context of requirements. You can't sometimes transplant things from one context to another, and if you try and do so, you know, you can lose your particular fight. And here the particular fight is like, you know, central pawn mobility. These guys in particular, one needs to be very careful to try and keep d5 control ideally. And the way to have done that would really, it seems to be c takes b as one of the strongest ideas, which seems to leave just a measly pawn on d3, but it's valuable enough considering white's control of d5 would be more reinforced. But here, you know, c4 is also a vulnerable pawn here. If not on the c file, then as demonstrated later on, especially if this queen is going round the back, then this kind of maneuver to highlight this pawn as a weakness, you know, as the game shows, becomes more evident. Again, there's a possibility of c takes b, which will be stronger than the game continuation here. In fact, c takes b, c takes b gives white a small advantage. Last time I checked this, c takes b, and this would be a fine position for white. These pawns are still doubled. d5 control's okay. If bishop b7, I think that runs into a4. a4 actually rook takes d5. Pardon me. Knight c7. So what's happening here? It seems well, knight e6. It seems, you know, so it's not that easy to dismantle d5. And given that's the case, so say a4. Because the knight's holding up b4 anyway, b4's held up. This would be apparently a small advantage for white as well. And we see here a lot of differences in this type of position. The central pawn mobility is okay, it's not an issue. This d3 is doing a good job. There's a 2-to-1 pawn majority. Strategically, this is a lot sounder than the game continuation. But in the game, I went on a slippery slope, it seems, by allowing this, you know, b takes c4. So I've knocked out my important d3 pawn, and we see the central pawn mobility becoming much more evident now and dangerous. It just takes some more strategic slips and lucrative tactical variations for the pawn mobility to actually increase as a major factor now. So this lucrative infiltration idea with queen b4 is actually letting the opponent go round the back, paradoxically. Although I'm going round the back, the opponent's going round the back as well. So if there's a qualification for a round the back strategy, it's that, as well as central pawn mobility. All of these factors are relevant perhaps to your game, but they weren't in the game, you know, you looked at, or from another video. You got a lucrative strategic title, but it's actually got to be absolutely relevant to your game position. And here it seems there's major issues with this infiltration of queen e7, even though the tactical rook f7 may be, you know, pyrotechnically getting an equal position with best play after bishop f5. I wonder actually what the best play was actually. From an engine point of view, I think this is still about equal, but I think it's become trickier. If I have to play a move like knight c1, you know it's become trickier. So knight a5, giving up e5, winning c4 maybe. No, maybe it's okay, but this requires, you know, some awkward looking moves like knight c1, which is not the sort of move we generally, you know, kind of want to play, but it would seem to be okay for white anyway. This kind of stuff, at least the pawns are being held up and there's only one central pawn here in this variation. So again, blockade. That shows as well, you know, the central battle was okay. So maybe even knight c1 was a key move in the resulting position. So I probably made things a lot worse with a further kind of not bothering about even bishop d3. So knight c7, I think, putting my position firmly on a slippery slope now, with moves like bishop f8 being really annoying and dangerous to actually the infiltrating pieces are being tactically, they're tactical liabilities as well. So it's really going pear-shaped now, allowing this bishop d3, winning c4. So of course now it's just lost after giving up the piece, even though I'm getting it back because of this tactic. The central pawn mobility is the dominant theme, absolutely without distraction now. And I'm going to be forced to give up a piece here because of this d3, d2 and queening. And the game doesn't last here, I just resign here. Anyway, so I hope there's something you get from that game. It's a little bit instructive. So there's certain themes about central pawn mobility, not being distracted too much by other game strategies or video titles. You've got a particularly unique strategic and tactical fight in your own game, which might render other strategies from other games completely irrelevant or not effective at all, because there's key factors in your game which stop them being that effective. You've got to find the right strategies in your game, and maintain, your strategic battle. And pawns are the soul of chess. Philidor. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks so much.